In 1977, a guy named Tom Ogle made a big, heavy American car with a V8 engine go 100 miles per gallon, only by modifying the fuel supply system and simplifying it. In 1977, a big YouTube channel, Driving for Answers, made a analysis of this invention and decided that it doesn't make sense. I'm gonna analyze this video and tell you why all the arguments given for why it couldn't make sense, why it couldn't work, are dog shit. First, let's watch the portion of the video that talks about the history and how the invention actually works, because this is actually a good part of the video.
This here is Tom Ogle. In 1977, he took a Ford Galaxy, a gigantic heavy car, which in it has a big 70s American V8. So essentially the fuel efficiency of a top fuel dragster with the performance of a Tata Nano. He took this car and didn't modify the engine at all. Instead, he just modified the fuel delivery system. And then Tom Ogle, his assistant, and a journalist from the El Paso Times, they got in the car and they drove from El Paso, Texas to Deming in New Mexico and back. That's a 200-mile round trip, and they did it with just 2 gallons of gasoline in the gas tank, giving us a fuel efficiency of 100 miles to the gallon. Before the car went on this round trip, all the fuel was emptied in front of a large audience and just 2 gallons were poured in, and then members of the engineering faculty of the El Paso University and independent experts, they were given the opportunity to fully inspect the car to see that there are no hidden fuel tanks of any kind. They inspected it and they concluded that indeed there was no hidden fuel in the car. The car did genuinely achieve 100 miles to the gallon in 1977. How? It's actually remarkably simple. What Tom Ogle did is that he vaporized the fuel before the fuel got into the engine. He took engine coolant, piped it around the tank to heat up the tank so that the fuel starts vaporizing already in the tank, and then he completely removed the carburetor and the fuel pump and piped the fuel vapors directly into the engine, where the engine sucked them in using engine vacuum. The vapors were combusted inside the engine ran and powered the car. A few months later, Tom Ogle got a patent pending on this invention. Now, in 1977, the US was in the middle of the oil crisis, so anything that offered a dramatic improvement in fuel economy was, of course, very attractive. And indeed, many different companies, including at least one oil company, 2 car manufacturers, and even the United States Air Force, expressed interest in Ogle's device. In 1978, Ogle sold his device to AFS, Advanced Fuel Systems, a company from Washington. According to the contract, he got an unspecified amount of advance money, 100,000 shares of AFS, 6% royalties on the sale of every one of his fuel-saving devices. He also got a monthly salary and the right to visit AFS. But just a few months later, after signing the contract, the Securities Exchange Commission, it filed a complaint against AFS, stating that AFS had violated provisions of the federal securities law, and so Ogle and his backers, they became entangled in red tape and legalities. By 1981, the legalities were not untangled, and the device was not on the market. In April of 81, Ogle was shot in the stomach by an unidentified man. He survived, but his room was guarded by police. A few months later, in August of 81, Ogle, just 26 years, was pronounced dead. According to medical examiners, he had died from an accidental overdose. He was drinking heavily while also consuming 20 pills of Darvon, which is a tranquilizer. He left no suicide note or will or anything, and his friends, lawyers, supporters, they refused to believe that he would deliberately take 20 tranquilizer pills while drinking heavily, despite the fact that he did have money and legal problems. Now, his wife, she inherited his estate and the benefits from his invention, but his invention never came to market. So how did Tom Ogle achieve 100 mpg just by vaporizing the fuel before it gets into the engine? Isn't that what carburetors and fuel injectors do anyway? They vaporize the fuel, right? Wrong. What carburetors and fuel injectors do is that they atomize the fuel. They turn liquid fuel into very, very fine droplets, and only then do these fine droplets vaporize. But even direct injectors, which work with very, very high fuel pressure, even they cannot guarantee the complete vaporization of all the fuel in all the conditions. And they cannot because there simply isn't enough time. If we compare carburetors, port injectors, and direct injectors, we can observe that carburetors sit furthest away from the combustion chamber, at the beginning of the intake manifold, and they work with the lowest fuel pressure, almost pretty much atmospheric pressure. Port injectors sit in the intake ports, so much closer to the combustion chamber, and they work with around 30 to 60 psi, which is 2.5 to 4 bar of fuel pressure. And finally, we have direct injectors, which sit right in the combustion chamber, and they work with the highest fuel pressure. As you can see, the closer we move to the heart of the engine, the combustion chamber, the higher the fuel pressure. This is because we have less and less time to vaporize the fuel the closer we are to the combustion chamber, and the less time we have, the higher the pressure we need to create ever smaller fuel droplets so that they can hopefully vaporize on time. And this is our problem, because a conventional fuel delivery system cannot guarantee the complete vaporization of all the fuel in all conditions. It means that it cannot guarantee a perfectly homogeneous air-fuel mixture inside the engine at all times. And inside a gasoline engine, we want the mixture to be as homogeneous as possible. The fact that we can't guarantee perfectly homogeneous air fuel at all times is the reason why we have a lean burn limit. A lean burn limit tells you how lean you can go. In other words, how little fuel you can use and still have good quality combustion inside the engine. A sort of conventional-ish modern engine can go as lean as, let's say, 22 to 1. Beyond that, combustion quality starts deteriorating dramatically, but more importantly, knock becomes a very serious risk. And that's because a lean air-fuel mixture, it burns slowly. And because it burns slowly, it spends more time heating the unburned air and fuel outside the flame front. If we heat it up enough, it's going to self-ignite. And that self-ignition of the unburned air and fuel is what knock is. And knock destroys engines. But if we vaporize all the fuel before it ever gets into the engine, we can guarantee a perfectly homogeneous air-fuel mixture at all times. Such a mixture burns faster, so there's less risk of knock. Such a mixture does not have pockets of poorly mixed air and fuel within the combustion chamber, so even less risk of knock. Such a mixture also burns more cleanly, so less emissions and less carbon buildup within the engine. With a fuel vaporization system, in theory, we could run as lean as 40 to 1, or even higher with a more advanced, more refined system. And the leaner we go, the less fuel we use. And more benefits of Tom Ogle's fuel vaporization system, it doesn't need a fuel pump at all. It uses engine vacuum. And the fuel pump is a parasitic loss. So with all of these efficiency advantages, could a fuel vaporization system be made to achieve 100 miles to the gallon? Yes, it could. In theory, I'm pretty sure it could. I don't think it's even that hard or far-fetched. The problem with a fuel vaporization system was never achieving 100 mpg. The problem is the price it pays to achieve 100 mpg. Tom Ogle's fuel vaporization system is still a topic today. 50 years after its existence, you can find it on articles and websites and forums, people posting stuff on social media. Of course, different people have different opinions, but what almost all the articles and posts fail to mention is that this fuel delivery system, the invention, was actually reviewed by the United States Energy Research and Development Administration, and they decided not to support the invention with any of their funding because they believed it was, and I quote, not practical. That's pretty much all they said about it. And
the first argument given is that an American agency didn't support this invention. How close-minded do you have to be? How uninformed do you have to be to think that if an American agency doesn't support an invention, that it means that it's a bad invention? Why would big oil support a car that goes 100 miles per gallon? Obviously, American agencies are influenced by big oil and other private companies. Obviously, American government is corrupted. A lot of American agencies are corrupted. The fact that an American agency looked at an invention that was supposed to revolutionize fuel consumption in cars tells you, if anything, it tells you that it was a good invention.
This, I believe, is the shortest, but also the most accurate description of this invention, because a fuel delivery system, such as Tom Ogle's or any other working on the same principle, even if it could be made to repeatably achieve 100 miles to the gallon on any kind of engine, in any kind of weather and outside conditions, even if it could be made to achieve that, it would still never make it to market. The first problem we have is that engines should not run at the same air-fuel ratio all the time. And if you remove the carburetor or the fuel injectors or any other kind of fuel delivery device, then you're losing your ability to quickly and effectively modulate your air-fuel ratio.
I need you to understand that all Tom Ogle's invention is using vaporized gasoline instead of liquid gasoline. That's all there is to it. You can play with the fuel to air ratio. There's no reason why you couldn't do that. I don't know if Tom Ogle has done that in his original experiment. There was no need to, because it was just a proof of concept. But there's no reason why you couldn't change the amount of gasoline vapor in the air that's being fed to the engine.
And you want different air-fuel ratios in different conditions. When you want to accelerate, you want a slightly rich air-fuel ratio for maximum performance. But an engine that gets its fuel piped from the tank, vaporized fuel just sucked into the engine via vacuum, is going to run at the same lean, very lean air-fuel ratio at all times. And that means horrible acceleration. We're talking something like, I don't know, a minute, maybe even 2 minutes to 60 miles per hour. And not just poor acceleration, we also have horrible responsiveness because we cannot quickly and effectively change the air-fuel ratio. The other problem we have is that the relationship between engine vacuum, which is our sole means of getting the vapors into the engine, and the relationship between engine vacuum and engine load and RPM is not perfectly linear. And that means that not only do we have poor acceleration, we have unpredictable acceleration.
Do you know how carburetors work? Carburetors are powered by the vacuum produced by the cylinders, and they work just fine. So what the fuck are you talking about?
The final problem is starting the engine in the first place. Tom Ogle's patent very conveniently ignores engine starting and just talks about using engine heat to vaporize the fuel to run the engine. So how do we vaporize the fuel with a stone-cold engine? Campfire under the fuel tank or something? I don't know. Of course, we could use a external electric heater to vaporize the fuel, but then that's just another type of loss, energy loss, and we would need probably a much bigger battery to support that heater, and I don't know. So on its own, a fuel vapor system, not a good idea. But what about this? Listen to this. What if we made a hybrid? What if we combined the fuel vapor system with a conventional fuel injection system? We get the easy starting and the good performance of the conventional system, and then when we're cruising, light throttle, highway, whatever, we switch over to the fuel vapor system for extreme fuel efficiency. That makes sense, right? Well, no. Let's completely ignore the fact that this system would be complicated and expensive, 2 different kinds of fuel tanks, lots of moving parts. We have to be able to quickly and accurately switch from one system to the other all the time as we're driving. So let's imagine that could be done easily. Let's also ignore the fact that now we have an engine that can do 40-to-1 air-fuel ratios reliably without fuel vapors. It's Mazda's Skyactiv X engine with the spark-controlled compression ignition. It can do 40-to-1 at low load, very, very lean air-fuel ratios.
Well, you're saying let's ignore it, but you're clearly putting a lot of attention to it. So let me tell you right now, you're saying nothing about how complicated and how much the SkyActiv X system works and how reliable it is. You're saying nothing about it. And you're also saying nothing about that okay, they both get the 40-to-1 ratio, the same as Tom Ogle's invention. But you're not talking about the fact that SkyActiv X only gets to 63 miles per gallon, not 100 miles per gallon. A system made by Mazda that is complex, that is expensive, that is very problematic, and it often doesn't work, only gets to a 63 miles per gallon in a 2-liter Mazda. And Tom Ogle got to 100 miles per gallon in a 1977 V8 engine in a heavy American car in his garage by simplifying it.
Let's ignore that engine as well. Let's ignore everything. Let's pretend we can do a hybrid fuel vapor fuel injection system, and somehow with a lot of research and development, it's simple and efficient and dead reliable. Even in that case, it doesn't make sense. It's never going to happen. It's not coming to market because fuel vapors, they have two more fatal drawbacks. The first drawback is safety. There's a reason why we vaporize fuel right in the engine milliseconds before we ignite it. And that's because fuel vapors are a lot more volatile, a lot easier to ignite than a liquid fuel. So a leak in a fuel vapor system is extremely dangerous. Not only is it very hard to detect because there's no liquid fuel coming, it's just evaporating into the atmosphere, so you can't really see it. And then all it takes is for you to be at the wrong place at the wrong time with your leaky fuel vapor system, and then somebody throws, I don't know, a cigarette in the direction of your vehicle, and suddenly you're waking up in a tavern full of adventurers and monsters looking for your next quest.
Let me tell you right now, I live in Poland. In Poland, we have millions of cars that are being fueled by propane, which is a gas. And somehow you don't hear about in the news about all these Polish people dying because they drive these propane fueled cars. Why? What can I tell you? Because the technology simply exists. You can have a car fueled by a gaseous fuel safely, and we have millions of these cars. And in all across the Middle Eastern Europe, there's many more, and they work and they are safe. What's more, in Tom Ogle's invention, your main gasoline tank doesn't have to be heated at all times. All of your fuel doesn't have to be vaporized at all times. You can have a main fuel tank, and you can have a secondary fuel tank which is heated, and this secondary fuel tank can be much smaller, and so that even if it did explode, there wouldn't be a massive amount of gas vapor that would get released.
The other problem, the other fatal problem, is that fuel is a complex mix of hydrocarbons. It doesn't all vaporize at the same temperature. Light ends like, I don't know, butane, pentane, that vaporizes around 30 to 60 degrees Celsius. This is something you can reliably, repeatedly vaporize with engine coolant heat. But heavy ends like nonane, decane, whatever, that vaporizes between 100 to 200 degrees Celsius. You cannot vaporize that with engine coolant heat, which means that with a fuel vapor system, you would have some unused fuel sitting in your fuel tank all the time, and you could not use that fuel in the conventional fuel injection system if you had a hybrid system, because it's different quality fuel, different energy content, resulting in unpredictable, weird performance. So you would actually have to empty the fuel from the fuel vapor tank periodically, and you would need like a network of places that would collect that fuel and, I don't know, refine it, reprocess it. It just doesn't make sense.
Actually, you could use the other fractions of gasoline in your secondary, as I call it, secondary fuel system. But you don't have to, because what if, now listen to me, all of your fuel was perhaps made of octane, both the primary and secondary fuel injection system? No problem then.
So basically, it turns out that the media and the people love a good story. Surprise. And a young man accidentally discovering something incredible, which then gets suppressed by the government and big oil and lizard people, makes for a really good story. And good stories are fine. I love good stories too. I just wish more of those good stories also included the boring science, which explains why this invention really never was and probably never will be disruptive technology. So then why did somebody try to kill Tom Ogle? How should I know? Maybe it really was a big oil CEO, a lizard person, somebody with very poor understanding of physics who thought that this invention would destroy their company. That being said, Tom Ogle really did have money and legal problems, according to the media reports from the time. He spent all of his advance money on a big fancy house and a bunch of Corvettes and Cadillacs before his invention ever came to market. So you get the idea. I really don't know, and it really doesn't matter. I'm sure that Tom Ogle really was a engineering and an engine and mechanics enthusiast, and no matter how you look at it, his death really was tragic. He was very young. But his death doesn't make his invention genius. That only works for artists.
And I want you to remember, if there's a good invention that would benefit you and that wouldn't benefit big companies, and a young man is shot by an unidentified man for no reason, and then this young man that has invented this invention shortly after dies over a accidental overdose on 20 sleeping tablets and overdosing on alcohol, is a bit sketchy, to say the least. And for driving for answers to then say that people just wanna talk about lizard people taking control of the world is a technique that was actually used by CIA. So CIA has actually had a program which the whole point of was to make all conspiracy theories the same. So they would try to make the public think that every person that doesn't think the government always want what's best for us are lizard people, are flat earthers. And so you have this perfectly valid questions that you may ask. Why did this young person that has invented something such great and that was offered so much money by a serious company, many serious companies, die in such mysterious manner? And he starts throwing lizard people at you. It's very immature, and you shouldn't be ashamed of using your logic.